Hi there. Welcome. Can you hear me in the back? Excellent. That's great. So welcome to QCCA. My name is Tina Takamoto. I teach here at California College of the Arts, and I'm also a board member of the Queer Cultural Center. And tonight's program is called Signifyin Marlon Riggs, and it includes a screening and panel discussion. And so I'm here to intro the intros and to do all the thank yous. So QCCA, Queer Conversation on Culture and the Arts, is a collaboration that started between CCA and QCC. QCCA, very clever, right? And it is an ongoing program where we bring in artists, curators, scholars, to have an extensive discussion about topics related to LGBTQI arts and culture. And tonight's program was co-sponsored by many people, so I have lots of thank yous, but I'm going to try to do them really fast. So it's co-sponsored by the CCA's Office of the Provost, the Film Program, Visual and Critical Studies Program, as well as QCC. And I'd just like to point out that there are a number of sign-in sheets. So if you are in my section of identities, or Jacqueline Francis's section of identities, or Julian Carter's section of normativities, you should sign in. And for the rest of you, you should sign up for the QCC mailing list, and you will receive monthly emails about things that are going on in the Greater Bay Area having to do with queer arts and culture. QCC is also the organizer for the National Queer Arts Festival that happens in the month of June, so look out for that. There's tons of amazing programming that goes along with that. In particular, I'd like to also thank Mark Breitenberg from the Provost's office, Tirza Latimer, the VCS chair, Rob Epstein, film chair, Pam Peniston, QCC artistic director, Marcy Edelman on the QCC advisory board, Vivian Kleiman, filmmaker who made this event possible, as well as all the people who make these kinds of things work. And that includes Kate Moore from VCS, Evie Raj from film, Rebecca Eisenberg and Lauren Malechek from Media Services, Mick Sweeney, who is our videographer, and the student techs, Lena and Mev, who will be videoing this evening's event. And then finally, we must thank Rudy, Lemcke, and Cheryl Dunye, who were the co-organizers, co-coordinators of this particular event, and especially Rudy for all the work that he does. He is amazing at details. He designed the program. He herds all the cats that make this event possible. And then finally, I'd like to introduce and invite Cheryl Dunye up to the podium. She is a professor in film here at CCA. She's also a famous filmmaker, known for My Baby's Daddy, Stranger Inside, Watermelon Woman, and most recently, The Owls, which is a psychological lesbian thriller about older, wiser lesbians. Those are owls. Older, wiser lesbians, and I understand that they take a kind of vengeance on a younger generation of queers who are indifferent to the grand contribution of the owls. So look out for that. And so please welcome Cheryl Dunye.
I don't even know what to say after that, Tina. Well, I wanted to let you know that there's going to be a wonderful panel right after the screening, so please don't leave. And definitely my classes who are supposed to be here, and there is actually no sign-in, but I know who you are. And I just wanted to say, you know, I started teaching, actually, you know, I'll go back to my first time meeting Marlon after having seen all of his works and being at his screenings, and I was in Philadelphia I must have been a young pup when I was a pre-owl, or I don't know what you want to call it. I don't know what they called those things back then. We weren't animals. We were just lesbian feminists or something. I don't remember. But I was at when he was shooting Essex Hemphill at his house. And I was invited to, witness this and participate and see how Marlon worked. And it was just amazing. There was so much energy in the room. There was a dialogue going on. It was shot at Essex's home at the time. And, I just felt blessed. I felt really blessed to share that moment. And, lo and behold, here I am years later teaching the film and then realizing how powerful it is today. So I don't want to go too much into, my memory of it. I want to share that with you afterwards with the panelists, Nicole Atkinson Roach, Blackberri, Jeanne Finley, Pat Turner, who are all his collaborators. And we're going to talk about really the circle of collaboration around Marlon, people who helped make his work, people who helped put it together, helped him sort through pieces. And I know that's something that's really about what CCA is about and about queer arts today. It's about collaboration and making work. And I think Marlon was really a groundbreaker in this community, black, white, red, yellow, green, but really speaking about, the multiplicity of identity. So, no further ado, I'm just going to, start the film, Black is Black Ain't. So I want to introduce our panelist, Nicole Atkinson Roach. She's on the far left. Yay. Nicole has been a producer, director, and editor, working in documentary for almost a decade. She received a Student Emmy Award for her project Word of Mouth in '91. She worked with Marlon Riggs, co-produced Black is Black Ain't, and she received in 1997, completed Locking Up, a half-hour documentary devoted to the exploration of the social and political significance of dreadlocks in African American culture, which received third prize in the documentary category from Black Filmmakers Hall of Fame. So, thank you. Next to Nicole, we have Jeanne Finley, and she's a media artist who works in experimental and documentary forms, including film and video, photography, installation, internet, site-specific works. She's a professor here at CCA in the film program. She's received numerous awards and grants. Her works are shown around the world and been exhibited around the world. She received Guggenheim Fellowship, Media Arts Fellowship from the Rockefeller Foundation. So we're happy to have Jeanne here with us. Next to Jeanne, we have Patricia Turner, who joined the faculty of UC Davis in 1990. She served as director of the American Studies program from '97 to '98, and as director of the African and African American Studies program from '98 to 2000. In '99, she was appointed vice provost in undergraduate studies, and she received her PhD from UC Berkeley in 1985 and taught at the University of Massachusetts, Boston from 1985 to 1990. Dr. Turner has served as a consulting scholar on several documentary and film projects. She did research for Marlon's films, numerous films, including Ethnic Notions, Color Adjustments, and most recently, she was interviewed in Portrait of the Artist, Richard Richardson, a documentary on the renowned quilter. She participates in the Scholarly Voices lecture series at the Museum of African Diaspora in San Francisco. And she continues to work and address issues around folklore, rumor, and culture, and just is wonderful. So thank you. And next to Pat, we have Patricia, Dr. Turner. We have Blackberri, who has been a pioneer in the Black queer art scene. I'm also on the board with him on QCC. He helped define the gay music scene here in the 1970s. His first major appearance was in 1975 on the KQED gay concert show, Two Song Makers. He has received numerous awards. He's a musician who's traveled around the world and has performed. He's in Black is Black Ain't, and he has contributed to films. His voice and his music has contributed to films like Looking for Langston, as well as his song Eat the Rich won the National Academy of Songwriters Competition Award. And he also has appeared in this film, Tongues and Tide, Affirmations, Anthem, No Regrets, and of course Black is Black Ain't. And we're happy to have him here on our panel also. So, what can we say here? It's a very, very full moment of spirit in the room. I don't know if you have some initial comments to share with us about the project, or should we sort of go into, look at my notes here, some of the questions that we came up with to talk about the piece. I don't know if you would like to sort of just talk about the work yourself and give some sort of remarks about watching it again for the first time in a long time, or something that you've actually seen more recently, and sharing with the audience your sort of initial feedback. And we're competing with some sort of foghorn, leghorn here. I don't know what that is. Panelists, no?
I guess I might say something. Actually, this is the first time I've seen this in probably a good 12 years, which seems like it was just yesterday that we worked on this project, but in reality it was, for me, I think some 17 years ago or some long period of time. I think what I was totally amazed by, because I think for the first time I was able to watch it as someone who had not participated in the experience, but I was amazed at how much it resonates today in terms of issues of identity, not just for African Americans. I'm sure it transcends just our community, but just the way Marlon dealt with it, I think it's still powerful. So I'm just kind of very appreciative that you guys are doing this and remembering his work and experiencing it again, because as you can see, it was extremely important to him. I mean, from his deathbed, literally, he was still working and continued to do so. And it's great to see that almost 2 decades later, this work is still reaching generations of people. So I just want to thank everybody here for putting this event on.
Well, Nicole, while you're speaking, why don't we ask a few questions of you? Yes. What was your key role in the production of the film? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Okay, I'll give you a little background. Basically, my relationship with Marlon started at the Graduate School of Journalism. I was there as a student studying journalism, getting my master's degree, and I was, when I met Marlon and took a class with him, I was completely inspired. I had no intention of ever doing anything related to video. I was going to be a print journalist, and my idea of documentaries was the voice of God talking in a bunch of images, so it was not interesting to me. When I saw Ethnic Notions and Marlon's later work, I was completely inspired, because to me his work was kind of a visual spoken word essay in documentary form. So I ended up working with him on various projects, starting off as a researcher on different projects and associate producer, assistant editor, then became an editor on one project. And then when Black Is came around, I was hired initially as an associate producer, and as he became ill, sicker, I took on a bigger role in terms of helping him produce the entire project. So I was 23 at the time, so I was extremely fresh out of school, and it was an overwhelming experience, not just because the project was so complex, but also you're dealing with someone who's your mentor and your friend, and you're watching him go through this process as he's, he's dying as he's doing this. So it was an incredibly difficult experience personally for me to go through, but I'm glad I did it, because I felt he had such an important message, and his spirit needed to be honored. So,
Jeanne, could you share that with us too? What was your key role in the production, or how did you get involved, or did this change?
Well, I didn't actually work specifically on the production. Marlon and I kind of grew up together at the Bay Area Video Coalition, when it was an organization that artists congregated, and we sort of had parallel play, I guess. We were working on projects of similar intent, which dealt with questions of identity. And I think that we worked together and shared our work with each other, and he certainly inspired me. And I think that, and we continued to work and be aware of each other and aware of the work that we were doing all the way up until the very end. And just because we're here at CCA, it might be interesting to talk about a moment when Marlon was we invited him to be here at CCA, get his, thank you, the honorary doctorate. And he performed on stage getting his honorary doctorate, much as he did in the film that you saw this evening, as well as in, he got up on stage and most of the people in the audience had no idea who he was, I would imagine, because they were parents of all of the students, undergraduates and graduates, from design, architecture. And Marlon got up on stage, and he wasn't really supposed to talk, and so the president of CCA was kind of just going to give him this thing, and you know, and Marlon sort of, who was of course much shorter than the president of CCA, was sort of elbowed him out of the way and got in front of the microphone and stood there and belted out a gospel spiritual song for the entire audience. And he said, "This is for my mother," who's in the audience, like way back there. And he received a standing ovation here at CCA from a group of people who had no idea who he was. And that was the presence that he had, that he could affect people in the most amazing way and transform an entire room. And it was just, so that was sort of how we worked together, was in a way of sort of hearing each other's voice. And it was a voice that certainly changed my life in many, many ways.
That's, wow. Oh, okay.
Closer?
Yes.
Okay.
I was going to ask the same of you, Pat.
I think that Marlon and I met for the first time in 1983, 84, when he had seen an exhibition entitled Ethnic Notions and decided that he wanted to make a documentary film about the objects in that collection and the history around them. And in order to get funding for the project, he approached several faculty members at UC Berkeley who he wanted to write letters to the funding agencies attesting to the value of the project. And one of them in particular, and he wanted them to consult. Marlon was a perfectionist. He had high production values. He had, if he was going to say in the film that the term Jim Crow originated in 1840, it had to be in 1840, not 1830. He wanted all of that to be, he was a perfectionist. And he wanted these professors to be consultants on the film. And one of them said that he had no time for it. He thought it was a worthwhile project. He had a graduate student who'd written a paper on the images of alligators and African Americans. That would be me. And that I should be, that this professor would give his name because he knew the funding agencies would recognize the faculty member's name. Nobody would have recognized Pat Turner's name then. So, I'll give you the letter, you'll use my name, but Pat Turner does all the work and you give her all the credit. And that was how we started with Ethnic Notions, and we enjoyed working together on that, moved on to color adjustment, and I did some research related to color adjustment. By the time Black Is came along, he had established you know, his nonprofit, needed a board of directors, and put together a group of us to serve on the board. Myself, Vivian Kleinman, his longtime collaborator.
Who's in the house with us,
yes.
Please.
And Herman Gray, and we were the original board members and are still the board members all these years later for Signifyin works. And because of Marlon's illness, of course, Black Is took a very different kind of path, and so it was taking longer to complete. There were grants that had to be satisfied and that thing. So I had a much more behind-the-scenes kind of a role in just working on making sure a product that would be finished that we could all be proud of was the goal there.
That's, I mean, when you start a work, you never know that it's not going to be complete with your spirit, and gosh, that's amazing. Blackberri, what can you say? How did you get involved with the production of this film, or what was your role, or when did you start working with Marlon?
I actually started working with Marlon with Tongues Untied. I had just gotten back from Europe. I had done some work with Isaac Julian's film Looking for Langston.
Yes.
I did the music for that, and I'd written a song that Isaac actually wrote the film around, called Beautiful Black Man, and Marlon wanted to use the song in Tongues Untied, but I had sold a license to Channel 4 too. So, but and that was when that's when I came on board with Marlon, and he liked my voice, so he used me a lot.
You do have a wonderful voice.
Yes.
Listen to it.
And so I sang in three of the films that he did, and I didn't do any talking in this one, but I did sing with the chorus at the end, Lift Every Voice, and I had that little cameo. It was longer, but it got chopped up.
Yeah, what was it like working? Talk a little bit more about that, like that day on the set with Marlon. How did he work? Because I think this is really important to see, you know, not just the influence of Marlon Riggs, but how did he work as an artist, you know, and here you were as a collaborator with him. What was that like?
Well, it's actually all day. When I usually work with him, I was with him all day. It wasn't that I came in and did what I had to do and left, but he just kept me around. He was an amazing director. He told me exactly what he wanted me to do, and I did it. And at the end, when we were all singing, we actually we sang that song maybe 3 times before he actually, I guess he chose the best version of it. But like Nicole, not Nicole, Jeanne, yeah, I know Nicole. Like Jeanne said, he was a perfectionist, and he just wanted it the way he wanted it, and until it was that way, you did it.
Okay. I mean, you did talk about that too, Pat, about his expansive knowledge and his expansive sort of level of perfection. I mean, how did that play out behind the scenes? I mean, here he is in front of the camera, here he is, you know, directing. I mean, I share that similar strength, and I think all of us who are, you know, carrying the camera and, you know, doing all this and that, how did he play back and forth with that power and, you know, this, you know, the authorities of his work, you know?
From my point of view, he always came to projects extraordinarily well prepared. And again, I have a little bit more experience of that with Ethnic Notions and with Color Adjustments, where there was a historical narrative that he was trying, that he was committed to communicating. So like most graduate students, I would say, well, here are all these things that you should read if you're going to be doing a film about this. And he read them all. He marked them up and had questions, and did not, he treated all of the research that was done very, very seriously, as he did, I think, every other aspect of the product. When he came to film me, it was a long experience. It was a long day. He had a very well prepared list of questions, and we'd go over them time and time again. And he wasn't going to leave any aspect of the product until he was satisfied that it was as good as it could be. And that was just so important to him. And I think it speaks to what Nicole was saying about all of the work standing the test of time. It's not just Black Is. Ethnic Notions and Color Adjustment are older, and I get recognized at conferences from those films, from people who've used them in their classes year after year, and you think to yourself, isn't there something better about Blacks in television to be using in 2007 than something that came out in the early 1990s? And the answer is no. And so I really want to stress how hard he prepared and how seriously he took the enterprise of each project.
Yeah, I think you were sharing that also, Jeanne, about your own. You're saying, I'm here on time. I'm always this type of artist who's there and shows up. Did you feel that affinity with Marlon as his, compatriot, colleague, as you guys work together and or work?
It was impossible to
the
keep up
tracks.
with Marlon. I mean, he was so. The rigor of his intellect was so always present that it was the debate. It was always a very lively debate when you were with him, and that I think it's. He was on the board of the Bay Area Video Coalition, and he kind of ran when I was working there, and we were working together, and we were trying to work with that organization, and even that wasn't his own organization in the way Signifyin works was, but yes, always very, very prepared, and always a step ahead of everyone else, definitely.
I guess you shared that with us too already, Nicole, about that, working with him as this, young being, and seeing that. I mean, did that change when he passed away and having to complete this work? How did that change for you? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
That's a deep question.
I know.
I mean, I think, a lot, for me, the experience, I never ever just look at the experience as a project, because the experience was so much about him. So my day-to-day life could be working on the project, but also driving him to dialysis. So it kind of all blended, and I think everybody who worked on it during that time period were not only people that knew Marlon extremely well and had worked with him on previous projects, but were clearly invested in supporting him with this project. And so I think, as challenging as it was at times, everybody was dedicated to getting it done. Clearly we were working under extreme circumstances, and the normal process of fundraising and delivering items on time was no longer applicable to this situation. I will say, just touching on what other people talked about before about his perfectionism and his work ethic, that my lasting impression of Marlon was that he was a visionary. He knew exactly what he wanted, and he knew it to the point that when he wrote grant proposals, I mean, he was writing it in a way that you could see what his project was going to look like in the end. So there were samples and snippets throughout, so he already knew what he was going to do. Maybe it did change by the end product, but you clearly understood what it was going to look like, and it was definitely well-informed, well-researched. And always, I think his appeal to me personally, and I'm sure it's shared by a lot of people, was the fact that he was able to do work that that you felt. It wasn't someone telling you something, you were experiencing something when you were watching it. And I think his ability to do that and to kind of break and do this kind of nonlinear storytelling that seemed disconnected but at the same time connected was extremely powerful. And I think it's just a talent that he had. It was who he was. I think, certainly facing death at such a young age, because I believe he was in his late 30s, I can't recall, certainly drove him tremendously in his work. But
so, Jeanne, you must have been around, like, for his sort of aha moment, as I call it, you know, when you kind of put the pieces together and he sees it for this piece. I mean, since you guys were, like, running through the organization, or were you there for it? Or do you remember when he was like, you know what, I want to do this?
Not for this piece.
Not for this piece?
For earlier pieces.
But what was it, you know, if you want to talk about that, I mean, you talked about having this vision of, you know, Nicole was talking about, you know, you could clearly see it. Was it?
Well, I think taking off from what Nicole said about the vision, I think that the way Marlon organized his storytelling was not, how am I going to tell a story? You know, I mean, you can get books and read about how to tell a story on film. He always started from, what story am I going to tell? And what story am I going to tell in Black Is, Black Ain't comes from, I want to tell the naked truth of who I am and what the Black experience is. And so the reason why I think you feel that feeling that you articulated so clearly is because he does, even though he had a vision of what he wanted it to be, it wasn't like he followed some kind of storytelling structure methodology that he then plugged in. He drew from experience and drew all that experience together to answer a question that he had asked himself. And that was how a story structure started. So his aha moments were the aha moments of, how do I answer this question of how to tell the story?
That's good.
And what story it is that I want to tell. What I want to answer the question of, what story is this?
And it seems like it was a plural thing. I mean, I don't know if you want to go into that a little bit more about that, Pat. And especially as a documentarian, or coming from sort of this school of, you know, organization of truth. You know, I think Black Is, Black Ain't, in one word, is a kind of, or a sentence, a synthesis of performance and fiction to get at a higher level of documentary truth. And, you know, Marlon was working, you know, up there with this, you know, sort of experimental form. Do you want to sort of go on that a little? I mean, I don't even say it's experimental, because, you know, experimental stuff, you know, color on film, and, you know, I mean, it was something different.
Yeah, I think the word improvisation is misused a lot, and so I don't want to use the word improvisation, because there was a discipline about Marlon's improvisation and his storytelling. He was a very disciplined individual. He had an incredibly neat desk. He had everything about him was orderly. And there was a discipline inherent in the storytelling, but I think that Jeanne's point about he asked a question he wanted answered and that he knew others would want answered, and that drove the process for him as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I think that's something to really note as we make art here. What we, you know, sticking to that sort of your truth, you know, and your truth that you're trying to get at. Blackberri, do you want to talk a little bit about that in, you know, as sort of the synthesis of where you collaborated with him and came in? I mean, you said that there were moments in the film that didn't appear, but what was there was rich. And, you know, how do you attest to that, you know, as an artist yourself?
Well, I just wanted to add that she was talking about ethnic notions and color adjustment. That Tongues Untied is also one of those films that that's seen by a lot of classes, and people have seen me and said, "Oh, I saw you in that film." Even children in my family says, "Oh, that's my uncle." My niece had it in her class in Santa Cruz. But I mean, when he had a the way he would put things together, he would tell everybody just what he wanted, and they would do it. I mean, that's the way he was, and he had a vision of how he wanted things to go, where you were to stand, and he would place people where they were, and then have us go through what he wanted us to do. I remember I was singing America on Anthem, and he wanted it sang a certain way. And I did it that way, but he wanted something else towards the end. So I had to go back and redo it. And actually it made it even better after I had done it. And so he had a way of bringing out the best. The best that you could do as an artist. Yes. He would, he told me, a long time ago, when he brought me into the film, because he was familiar with my music, and I've been doing music in the community for years. And he said that he loved the way my voice sounded musically, and that he really wanted to use that. And he saw that I could pull more out of that version of the song that I did than I did. And so, yeah, he saw things in my talent for it the way he wanted to use it, and he used it in a way that I would never use it.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, when you give to a project, give it your all.
Oh yeah.
You don't even know what
definitely.
people are gonna do with it. If you're gonna that's when I think about production. I'm hiring somebody to be my sound person or to be my whatever, and they're going to be represented for that years later. And that's what you really bring them for in the project. And if you're not going to live up to that title, then don't step up to it. So it seems like
It's true.
we all share the same thing, right? This is really interesting to me, and maybe you could talk a little bit about this, Pat. So since his death, this work is really about the mainstream, right? In one way, but it doesn't play in the mainstream. ITVS, PBS. I mean, it really is about that, that kind of our placement within the mainstream as Black, gay, queer, plural. And you're sort of, holding, his work as his, collaborator, his company. How do you see it out in the world? How, who's trying to work with Marlon now? I mean, we all know him here on this panel, but I'm sure more than half the room doesn't. And what does that, what does that mean when a work needs to be there that way?
Yeah, I think that's something that we've taken very seriously, and probably the only thing harder than getting funding for the creation of arts is getting funding for the preservation of arts that are in existence. We were very pleased recently. We have been able to get a permanent home for all of Marlon's work at Stanford University. Oh. And they're taking, I think there may even be some people in the audience. Are there folks from Stanford here who are working with the collection?
Oh, there's one, yeah. Thank you. All right, great.
Because when we still had the materials here, they were in an office. If a graduate student wanted to work with things, we had to let them in. We didn't have the correct environment that we're assured of having now with the collection being at Stanford, and it's our hope that it will continue to inspire young artists and people will continue to work with it.
Do you want to comment on that at all, Jeanne? Do you want to say anything about that? Because, I mean, so many of us never even, we're not even thinking about that.
I mean, I think at the heart of this film that we just saw is really the notion, he says it in the film, we need to defy the categorizations that others place upon us. And that's, you know, that defiance. And, you know, as individual identity. And I think that in regards to his films, I imagine that he would want the films themselves to also defy that same kind of categorization. And so if you're defying, you know, categorization, you're both excluded and included simultaneously. And I think that's kind of what's happened to some of his films since, you know, since his death. So I mean, I think that, I imagine, I mean, you would probably know better, but I imagine that there would be, that he would derive some pleasure from the idea that the film is so hard to categorize that it can't exist necessarily within or without of the mainstream. It is its own thing. And so, you know, we have to, I think, now 20 years later, redefine what it means to be inclusive in terms of the mainstream. And that's sort of our job, those of us who keep the work close to us and teach and show it to our students, is to say, there is no mainstream, really. And that's what the film is really about. There is no one identity for us as individuals or for the films that we produce.
Nicole, I wanted to ask you a little about the cutting room floor. What was left out? Go ahead.
Gosh, it was so long ago. You know, as you can see, he traveled all over, and there was tons of footage. I think I can't really say what so much was left out as what was included, and I don't think when he originally envisioned this that we were going to have all these hospital scenes, but at the end it became very clear that we needed to set up what was taking place and how it impacted the process, so you couldn't not have that be a part of it. I think the woman's voice you hear a lot asking the questions is Christiane Badgley, who co-directed and edited the piece. And I think, you know, doing those trips were probably her way of trying to figure out more so what he was trying to achieve, but at the same time ended up being used as part of the piece. And, you know, it clearly changed as Marlon changed. And I think, I remember early on when he was fundraising, he did have a piece with Bill T. Jones dancing, and we were cutting something together with the dancing and some commentary. So, I mean, there are definitely a lot of what he originally envisioned, but I think it probably changed for him as he went out on shoots, even, you know, as he was ill, you know, what he wanted to include in there. And there's a lot. I mean, I think he covered a lot about, you know, what we deal with in the African American community when it comes to excluding each other based on all these different parameters. So,
well, I'm going to stop with the questions and actually turn it over to the audience, actually, to see what you guys would like to talk about the piece. There's a woman right there in the back, and you're going to have to stand up and raise your voice. The woman with the hair and the, I'm sorry. No, you, yes, I'm sorry, yes, you. Yes, but could you stand up, because we don't have a floor mic, and it just helps, you know.
Right. First of all, it was great to see this work again. It's been a really long time, and it makes me want to take a look at every piece he's ever done, because it brings a lot to mind. And one of the things that I appreciate now, which I don't think I had the capacity to really appreciate then, was the fact that this speaks to me about identity in some really profound ways that I've been grappling with over the last many years, and it has to do with Jewish identity. And I think the division that exists within Jewish identity is very complex, and it's present within the Black community, and it is very present within the Jewish community too, having to do with politics, inclusion and exclusion. So I really appreciate seeing this, because I really see parallels and resonances that I hadn't seen before.
He would have liked her.
Someone else, yes?
One of the things I don't remember seeing the first time I saw this film when it was new was how rich it is in the way it brings in many different arts. So I was really enjoying that a lot, maybe because of it's kind of historical overlap. With Tongues Untied, it's really intuitive for me. Yes, of course, there's S.S. Hempel. Yes, of course, I can see why that. But I'm actually really intrigued by the question of who chose which Bill T. Jones to put in and why. You know, and there's so much that could have been done in there, and why not other? Like, this looked like it was choreographed for this, rather than from some larger body of his work. What's that about?
Wow. I believe it was choreographed for this, and clearly he talked to Bill about what he was doing and what he was trying to achieve and some of the main themes he was talking about. I think, you know, as you can see, there's a lot in there. You have Mike Tyson with the, you know, you have so much going on, and it was taking place at a time right after the LA, so a lot of it was timely in terms of what was going on right then, which really reflects what's going on right now, to be quite honest. But I think, you know, I can't speak to what parts of Bill hit the cutting room floor, but clearly he was used throughout in key points. And it's interesting you bring up kind of the cast of characters, so to speak. I mean, certainly S.S. Hempel, who was a longtime collaborator and well-known poet. I mean, even I, watching the film, saw a lot of faces of people I knew and I'd forgotten had been a part of this, because it was basically just a corralling at times of various black people to come together. And I distinctly remember the day we shot that Black Is, Black Ain't chanting, and I was amazed that he was able to get Angela Davis, who's not a singer or not a performer, a former Black Panther Party and just an icon, to show up to do some sort of performance-related experience, and how he had everybody there. It wasn't like each person showed up separately and did their thing and moved on. Everybody showed up at the same time, and we were all in the same room trying to achieve all of this. So, I mean, it was just the power of who he was, and so.
Marlon was incredibly persuasive. and you know, getting Angela to come and do something that was out, you know, with color adjustment, you know, he wanted Diane Carroll, and I remember that was a challenge to make that work. He didn't understand the word no very easily. When he showed the original grant application for Ethnic Notions to someone who was very familiar with the priorities of the funding agency, they said, you're never going to fund this. This just isn't going to fly. And he said, I'm just, you know, basically, he was not without an ego either. He said, it's going to be a good film. They're going to help me make it, and they're going to fund this. And he wrote the best possible grant that he could, and was well researched, and all of the pieces were there. And he persevered. He made things work. He convinced people who didn't sing to sing, and he convinced Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks does not do documentaries. You don't see her. You don't see Bell Hooks doing much of this, you know. But he needed Bell Hooks, so she had to be there.
And it seems like getting the rights too. I mean, you can't really, like Phil Donahue rights. I mean, you're buying just rights, but there were just a lot of footage in there that, you know, you guys had to do actually on the other side. So there was that, like, he set the groundwork, but you sort of continued with that, you know, spirit, definitely. Oh, another question. Yeah.
So you guys touched on his discipline and his perfectionism. Patricia, you mentioned that he had an improvisation. Can you elaborate on that?
You know, it was a wonderful mix. It was a wonderful mix of being very disciplined and thoughtful and, you know, working from a script, but combined with the the sensibility to defy narrative and to connect things in unorthodox ways. And if I knew how he did it, I would do it myself.
Was there a script? I mean, what does the script look like for, you know, this sort of project? I mean, you might even know, too, a little bit, Jeanne, having been, you know, around him, talking or seeing, you know, what was happening at Bayvac when he came in or did stuff. I mean, I stress scripts, everyone, and you can throw them out when you're, cutting, but, what is that like in within the kind of traditional concept of sort of making work and sharing it with somebody? Because I say you have to, like, you have a room full of, dignitaries in there, and, everybody to sing, I mean.
Well, I mean, I think he can get bell hooks because it's not necessarily because it does defy the categorization.
Okay.
So I think then his power of persuasion, the spontaneity and the flexibility is really built into the structure of what he does.
Okay.
So he can have a really tight script or not, but he begins with this notion that the film does not have a preordained structure per se, even though he's working within structure. It's this constant contradiction that works really well, and it's not really a documentary. So you can see Bell Hooks, who does such a great job in that film, she doesn't feel like she's answering a traditional documentary form question. It's something completely different. She's a participant. She's not responding to questions. She's participating. So he asks everyone to participate in the big question of what the film is.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really a good thing to think about, too, when you're trying to build these sort of works up. Yes, in the back.
I just have a question about the African community. Is that still going on? Or is that something that was happening during that movement?
The one in the South?
I don't know. There's so many. I'd love to follow up. I'd love to know what has happened to those young boys at the end. I'd love to know if the African community is still there.
The chief has crossed his past, but the village is still there, and I know I've met several people from the village and people who travel back and forth. They have lots of different kinds of cultural events and spiritual events. It happens to be in my spiritual tradition, not exactly totally, because I was initiated in Cuba, but it's the same premise, and the village is doing quite well, even though he's the chief is no longer there. He's died. I imagine they have a new chief. I don't know who that is.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
I'm really obsessed with the process, and so I'm just curious, as an artist, as someone who and as a person on board, just like as a creative person in the world, how did he work? Did he have a notebook that he was always taking notes in? Did he what were the sort of pieces of him that kept him? How did he record his thoughts?
I actually think, Vivian, did he have a notebook?
Yeah,
he had a notebook. He had wonderful files.
This is Vivian. Do you want to come up, Vivian?
No, I'll just.
Or just stand. Yeah.
Marlon actually kept really meticulous notes, and he worked really much from the scripts and prepared questions very carefully before interviews. And you all will very soon get a chance to access this stuff, because thanks to Stanford University, they are going to be scanning a lot, every piece of paper, but a lot. So you could be sitting on an island on a beach in Thailand, and as long as you have access to the Wi-Fi, you'll be able to look at the faxes that went flying during the whole brouhaha over Tungsten Tide, or the scripts or the proposals that Pat was talking about. A lot of that will be available to anybody and everybody at your leisure. So that's one of the joys of working with a place like Stanford.
Vivian, I have a question. I always hear your voice in the hospital.
Me?
Yeah, is that you?
No, not them, but I was there a lot.
Were you? Okay, I thought that was you.
Yeah, no, at one point I was there 11 o'clock at night and after visiting hours, and the nurse came in looking at me because she's not supposed to be there, and she says, "Oh, you must be his sister."
And you said yes.
Of course, he did.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, I'm going to round this up so we can actually have a moment for you to, just feel the spirit and take it on. And I think, this is a wonderful example of, just living with this piece and the circle around the creation of this piece and how, we need to, persevere, and have our set strong idea as makers and don't give up, I think that's the truth. Just really don't give up, but know what you're talking about, as a concept, and apply it to how you produce your work and apply it to how you post-produce your work, because it's going to live on beyond you, and make those works that sort of live on beyond you. And I just want to thank everybody for being here and sharing in this spirit, so let's just take a moment for that. And for Marlon, because he's here with us. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.